Great. Thank you, Geoffrey. Great. All right, let's kick off. We're starting the recording. So welcome everyone to the Drone Tasking Manager webinar. My name is Petya Kangalova. I'm part of the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team, and I'll help facilitate today the webinar. Very excited to have Ivan and Uttam. You'll hear more from them today. So just moving on to the next slide, a bit of house rules before we jump into the exciting things you hear today. As you've just heard, we are going to record this webinar for people who are unable to join us today. And also Geoffrey, my colleague who is supporting us, to also live stream it on YouTube. There's some people who can watch that online. Again, a little reminder about our code of conduct. I know quite a few of you who are joining us today, but making sure we're welcoming, respectful, careful in our words and phrasing. There'll be plenty of opportunity for you to ask questions as well at the end. And yeah, trying to understand different perspectives for today. So before we jump in, let's go into the next slide, Geoffrey. We're going to do a little icebreaker to see where you're joining us from and what your I'll just quickly do that. Actually, yeah, before we move into that, let me tell you what we're going to do for this 1 hour. So we're going to start with icebreaker, as I mentioned, and then we're going to hear from Ivan a bit about the rationale for the drone tasking manager. Then we're going to jump into Uttam, who tell you more details about the development of it. And then there'll be plenty of time for discussion. So let me now quickly share a link, and I would ask maybe Geoffrey briefly to also share that link to go into a very short icebreaker for all of you. All right, so here we are. If those of you who are familiar with Menti, you can scan the code. We've spent 5 minutes on this. Scan the code, or you can go to menti.com and enter that number, or I can also just send a link in the chat to all of you so you can join in, and we'll see as people give thumbs up. We have 4 questions just as a start, and then we'll jump into the exciting thing. So if you've just joined us, please go into scan the code or click on this link that I just shared in the chat, and we're going to go through four questions just to wake us all up and get into the exciting things. Right, I see 10 people. I'm going to wait another 20 seconds or so. And then we're going to go into the first question, which very much links to all of you who joined a bit earlier and you were saying where you're joining us from. We're going to do that again, and we're going to have that quickly on a map. So I know for some people it's morning, lunchtime, evening. So if you've just gone onto the Menti, if you just join us, click on that link, and if you can add, where do you feel most at home? Maybe it's not where you are at the moment. So let's see if we can cover all the continents. Amazing, great. Feel free to add. Nice, great. We have a few more representatives, so a few more seconds here. Great, we love maps, so good to have a few dots in here. Amazing. Okay, good. We have some South America. Amazing. Great. I'm going to wait a few more seconds and keep this open so you can also add a bit later. Great. It really shows, I think, that going back to the drone tasking manager, you hear that there will be use for all those parts of the world. Okay, now, how is everyone feeling? I know it's the start of the webinar. Maybe you've had a long day. Maybe you're just starting your day. How is the energy? We're hoping to bring that up so you feel engaged. Good, great, excited. Good. We would love to keep that energy refreshed. Okay, I'm loving the good energy. We'll keep that. Hopefully even more excited. Curious? Yes, that's what we want to see. Great. I love, thank you. I love that. Yeah, I love the excitement. Haven't seen anyone who is tired yet, so that's good. That's good. All right, two more questions, and then we go into, great. It's all happy, happy energy. Keep that going as you hear from Ivan and Utam. All right. So next, jumping into this, you're talking about drones today. You hear a lot about drones. Have you flown a drone? Yes, of course. I'm sure we'll maybe have quite a few. My answer will be no, but I would love to. So I'd love to learn more. Great. Let's see. Okay, great. We have majority of people who have flown drones. I'm sure you hear from Ivan a bit later about which specific drones maybe he'll be interested in. Great. If you've just joined us, I know people join us a bit. Oh, wow, we have a good balance now. We're going to wait 10 more seconds and then we go into the sessions. Good. So we have people who are interested in. Great. Okay. The next question is, have you used drone imagery? So maybe you haven't flown a drone, but you have used drone imagery to digitalize data layers, given some examples. So yeah, have you been a user of drone imagery, maybe seen the importance, the use of it? Wonderful. No? Okay, so maybe you'll learn more. I love this. I think it's always good to have a mix because maybe we have people who have done it or others who you hear now from Ivan and Uta. All right. Let's see, give it another few seconds. Okay. Good. Always good to have a mix because I think you can learn from people who have done it and who have used drone imagery. All right. And the last question, and then I'll move on to the slides and you hear now more about the drone tasking manager, is I'll keep that open. So you hear now a lot more about the rationale, how the idea came about of the drone tasking manager. And all of you joined from so many parts of the world with different experience. So you don't have to answer now. Maybe you already know. If you do, feel free to type in. But we would love to hear what use case you see. So I'll keep that open. We can come back at the very end. I'll share the link. But great. Add some answers now. And you hear now from our presenters. We'll keep this open so you can maybe have more detailed things to say as you hear the presenters. All right. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing now, and I'll. This is great. I didn't expect so many people jumping in straight away. So it seems like you already have some ideas. That's why you're here. Public safety, great. All right, this is amazing. We will share some of the results actually after the webinar as well. So please keep adding Timor-Leste specific examples. Wonderful. All right. To make sure we have enough time for questions, let's go back. Geoffrey, I'll stop sharing so we can go back to the slides. All right. So as I said today, you hear mainly from Ivan and Utam. So Ivan from the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap Team, that's his job title. I'm sure he will use some different introduction. And then, so you hear first from him about the rationale, how the idea came about. And then going to the next slide, you hear from Utam, who is Chief Business Officer at Naxa, working on this collaboration, and also Executive Director of Nepal Flying Lab. So handing over to Ivan now to hear about how the whole idea, how this came about, and a bit about the tasking manager, and then Utam will go into a bit more of the detail. If you have any questions, feel free to type in the chat. I'll keep an eye, and we'll have plenty of opportunities for answers, discussion. Over to you, Ivan.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me, Petra? Sound check?
Yes, all good, all good.
Excellent. Okay, so welcome. Thanks, everyone, for coming. Seems like a great turnout. This is exciting. So drone imagery. Well, we know that the Humanitarian Mapping Project and the Open Mapping Project globally has depended on imagery forever. When OpenStreetMap was originally founded in 2006, it was actually using GPS traces. By 2008, we were using satellite imagery from Bing. By 2016, we were using super high resolution imagery from Maxar. And if you think about the OpenStreetMap project and the Humanitarian Mapping Project in general, what we really kind of did was we looked at the whole world and we filled in detail. We started with, sort of all of the land masses and all of the continents of the world. And then we started adding all of the streets. It was originally OpenStreetMap that got this whole ball rolling. And we added, more and more detail, smaller and smaller streets. We started adding residential areas. At a certain moment, we're actually adding things like individual buildings. And that, of course, that adding of global detail was happening as we were getting higher resolution. So what kinds of resolution can we get from imagery? Well, the original sort of imagery that we got from Bing back in the early 2010s, you were looking at 50 centimeter to 100 centimeter images, 1 meter per pixel. And that was enough that you could draw big roads, but you couldn't draw much detail. You certainly couldn't draw a building. By 2016, 2017, we were very routinely digitizing with 30 centimeter satellite imagery. Each pixel was a square of 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters, which meant that you could actually distinguish, in many cases, buildings quite clearly. Now, the absolute theoretical best that you can get with satellite, photo imagery is about 30 centimeters. The best you can do with a satellite at all is with what's called synthetic aperture radar, which is 16 centimeters, so twice that resolution. But that's really weird looking. If you've ever seen SAR, synthetic aperture radar image, it looks weird. It's kind of tough to digitize from. Now, on the other hand, drones can easily do 2 or 3 centimeter imagery, enough that you can actually distinguish people, enough that you actually have some serious privacy concerns. I personally only ever create imagery at 5 centimeters max, because at 5 centimeter imagery, that's still incredibly detailed. You can digitize a vehicle easily, but you can't distinguish a person's face. So, below that, below 5 centimeters, you start entering some real privacy concerns. Now, in 2023, we lost access to the best satellite imagery. The company Maxar was acquired by private equity, and they stopped allowing humanitarians to derive products, i.e. to digitize from their imagery and share those results freely. So we've actually regressed. From 2023, we're actually punted back almost 10 years. As of 2016, we had this 30 centimeter imagery. As of 2023, we're back to Bing, which is very often old imagery, and very rarely is it better than 50 centimeter resolution. So the whole mapping project is actually in crisis because of our lack of imagery to digitize from. The things that people expect us to be able to do, we can no longer do anymore. So what do we need to do? Drones. The dream here is that rather than depending on satellite companies or people from outside of our space, we're able, as communities, as an open mapping community, to generate our own imagery. And we've been doing that with drones on and off for many years, most of the time with expensive Swiss drones. But the key here is that it's possible for humanitarians to actually create their own imagery as communities. If you think of if you think of a Swiss drone, you'd normally buy an EB for something like $20,000. That's the SenseFly EB. And the SenseFly EB will give you approximately 20 square kilometers per day of 5 centimeter resolution imagery. But who has $20,000? And who has permission to bring a drone like that into their country? And who doesn't, have the fear of it being stolen or an accident? Whereas a little quadcopter that costs $1,000 can do 2 square kilometers a day. So if we think about that for a moment, a $20,000 drone will get you 20 square kilometers a day. A $1,000 drone, or maybe what if you buy 20 $1,000 drones? That gets you 2 square kilometers per day per drone. That gets you 40 square kilometers. So suddenly you have this calculation that the same amount of money invested in small drones operated by the communities gets you a larger number of square kilometers per day. But wait, you say, now this means we actually have to employ lots of local people. Previously, we could have one person from Switzerland flying that drone while everybody else watched. Isn't that better? No, it's not. We actually prefer a situation where there's 20 people actually involved. There's more redundancy. That means if somebody can't come to work that day, there's 19 more people who are still around. It's local opportunities, it's local skills, it's ability to have people who know how to respond when there's a disaster in the same context. There's all kinds of reasons why I think it's vastly superior to have 20 people doing 2 square kilometers a day than one person doing 20. Now, of course, if your operator expects to be paid 500 Swiss francs a day or 600 euros a day, that's not going to work. You can't afford to have a person like that doing 2 square kilometers a day. But in so many of our communities, brilliant, talented youth are being wasted. They're not being used. They're underemployed. We're not actually enabling them to do this kind of work. And bringing a $20,000 drone into the country doesn't improve that situation. But there's a problem. If 20 people want to coordinate their efforts, that's extremely difficult. I mean, myself, I can fly one little quadcopter and I can do my couple of square kilometers a day. And if I really work hard, I'm really careful, I can do adjacent flight plans that will actually cover a whole area. If there's 2 people, that gets harder. It's still possible, but it's hard. If there's 5 people, forget it. It's impossible. There's no way for 5 people, particularly if they have different make and model of drone, to accurately coordinate their efforts in such a way that they can cover a large area with consistent overlap of images, consistent resolution, consistent color, and so forth. So what do we need? If we want 20 people with $1,000 quadcopters to be able to cover an entire city, do the job, the paid professional work that right now is going to consultants with $20,000 Swiss drones, we need the software and the tools to coordinate efforts. The Drone Tasking Manager is a tool to allow a large number of people to approach a city. Everyone walks in, they're able to choose the area that they're willing to fly within the area of interest. They receive flight plans, and these flight plans are specifically calculated for their make and model of drone and for the needed imagery for that area, not only to work well for their little area, but to match with everyone else's. In other words, a tool to allow 20 people to cover an entire city in a way which is actually more cost effective, more ethical, and even, we'll talk about this later, higher quality than a single person with a $20,000 drone. So there's the rationale. Because we can do it. Because drone and imagery acquisition doesn't have to be the province of foreign contractors with $20,000 machinery, because we can do it ourselves as communities. We just need the tool, and we're building the tool. Over to you, Petya.
Thank you, Ivan. I love thank you so much. And yeah, you can see on the slide again, also support of the project by the World Bank. But we'll hear now, I'll hand over now to Uttam, over to you, and maybe moving to the next slide to tell us more details about the Drone Tasking Manager, the users. I know for some of you, some things might be a bit more technical, but yeah, bear with us. And over to you, Uttam. I'm very excited about this partnership and hearing from you.
Thank you, Petas. Thank you so much. Let me introduce myself and my organization Naxa first, and then I'll talk about the functionalities of the tool that we are building. Hi everyone, thank you for joining this webinar today. My name is Uttam Pudasaini, and I'm currently working as the Chief Business Officer at Naxa. So Naxa is a team of 105 youth based in Kathmandu, where we design and develop geospatial solutions for different problems and challenges that we face around. We have been working with HOT since a couple of years now, and we are building some of the tools like the tasking manager, the field mapping tasking manager. And recently we had the opportunity to start working on this fantastic tool that my friend Ivan explained explained in a very comprehensive manner. So the technical team at Naxa is currently working on the design and development of the drone tasking manager together with HOT. And this initiative is being supported by the World Bank, which Ivan will talk about in a while. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to share with you the technical details and also the functionalities of the tasking manager. So as Ivan mentioned, the whole idea of a tasking manager is to develop a tool that can facilitate and coordinate multiple people trying to do the drone mapping together. So before understanding about the features, let's try to understand who are the different users of the tasking manager. So there are 4 categories of users of the tasking manager. The first categories are called project creators. So for example, let's say if I'm Red Cross or if I'm World Bank, and if I want to support the data acquisition, let's say in a community that have been affected by flood, then I am the project creator. So all I have to do is go to an area, define a area that I want to map, and then the system automatically divides that project area into multiple tasks. So for those of you who have been working on the tasking manager, the approach is very similar. If there is a bigger area to be mapped, the drone tasking manager automatically divides that entire area into multiple tasks. The second category of user are the local drone pilots who live in multiple countries. So I am from Nepal. So let's say if I create my profile on the tasking manager, then I become the drone operator. So what happens is whenever a project gets created, I get a notification on my device that there is a project, there is a task in my community or in an area that I'm registered to. So what happens is I, as the drone operator, now have the opportunity to apply for that particular tasking mission. Very similar to how I do it in the tasking manager system that currently exists. The third category of users are the data users, because the whole idea of the tasking manager is to create a high resolution imagery someday in the future of the entire world, or at least the most vulnerable and disaster prone countries around the world. So as a data user, I should be able to use the data that has been generated by the system. That's the third category of the users. The fourth category are the regulators. And why we want to do it is because, of course, we want to crowdsource the entire drone mapping activity, but we want to do it in a more safe, responsible, and ethical manner. So we envision that in the future, the civil aviation of any countries will also be the official kind of the user of the platform. And by being the user of the platform, what they can do is they are now aware of the drone activities happening around them. And if needed, we will also develop functionalities in the future so that the civil aviation officials will be able to authorize the individual flights as well. So next slide. This is a screenshot of the user management interface of the tasking manager. So once we go live, you will be able to log into the portal as these 2 different kind of the user, either as a project creator or as a drone operator. And in some cases, if you are both, let's say sometime I could be a project creator as well as a drone operator, then in that cases also the platform allows you to log into the system separately. Next slide. So there are this is the visual representation of what the creation of a project and a task looks like. So if there is a 10 square kilometer area that needs to be mapped and it's a flood prone community, then what the platform does is the drone tasking manager automatically divides that area into multiple tasks, as you can see on the slide here. So there are like these different size. There are rectangle and also there are like square shaped size. So all of these individual polygons are the mapping task that people can select. So as a drone operator, I can select the task that I'm interested to flight. There is a certain mechanism to check if I am eligible to fly or not. And after that, I'll be able to conduct the mapping mission over there. Next slide. So there are 6 categories of features and modules that we are currently building in the drone tasking manager. I'll try to explain them one by one. The first module that we are building on the tasking manager is the user management functionality. So as I just shared with you, there are 2 categories of users, but beside that, there are also admin level user who needs to be managed. So the drone tasking manager, it's an open source platform that we are building, and then it supports the creation of these multiple kind of users. And what we have done is we have simplified the onboarding process so that with very little information, you can sign into the platform and you can always come back and complete your profile afterwards. The second module is the survey project creation module. As I mentioned earlier, if there is a project area that I want to map, as a task creator, I can sign in and then I can create my survey project. So what this does is, like, I can specify the resolution of the image that I want. So for example, I want to map Kathmandu in 5 centimeter resolution for some flood response activities. So all I need to do is go to the platform, specify the boundary of Kathmandu, and then say that I need an imagery that is 5 centimeter resolution. So with the help of that module, it we have tried to simplify and manage the survey project creation option. Another important feature of the platform is the notification function. So what happens is, first the user sign into the platform, second they create the task, and then third what happens is the drone operator receives the notification. So at the moment they receive the notification on their email. So if I am a drone pilot based in Kathmandu, I will receive a notification that there are n number of tasks in the tasking manager that I can go and fly and do the mapping. So within this third functionality, what we have also done is there is a status management sort of thing as well. Because sometimes what happens is, like, let's say as a drone operator, I apply to the task, but for some reasons, if I am not eligible, then the status also can be changed as well. So that's how the third module works. The another functionality is the data upload and the flight plan offload functionality. So our system will be generating the flight plan for every individual task. So as a drone operator, if you will be able to view the flight plans, and if there are no changes, you can directly start your mapping mission. If there are some changes, like for example, you want to change the flying height or certain parameters, then you can make a request to the platform when the full version of the system is out. And what happens is, once you begin your flight planning mission, once there are multiple drone pilots in an area mapping multiple mapping tasks, what happens is they can also upload the data sets directly to the platform. Next slide. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to build an entire package that does not just support the data collection part, but also the data processing and the mapping part. So we have another open source software such as ODM, Open Drone Map, and others. So what happens is not in the MVP phase, but someday in the like in the later version of the tool, what we'll also have is an automatic linkage between the data upload and the data processing module. So as a user, you don't need to worry about, again, importing your data to some other platform. You can do it all within the ecosystem of the open source tool that we are building. So that's how the data upload and processing module has been envisioned. Another one is the data visualization module. So all of the outputs that you have generated, and after the processing, you'll be able to view the outputs, output like the orthophoto maps and 2D and 3D maps that you have captured. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, what we will plan to have in the drone tasking manager is the local regulation and compliance module. And I understand that this is very complicated and this varies as per the country's context. But because I gave you an example of Kathmandu, let me tell you how it works in the Nepalese context. So what happens is the local regulators will also be one of the users of the platform. And if there are mapping tasks happening, the local regulators can see where these activities are happening by looking at the flight plans, and this will make them understand where the drone activities are happening and if there is a safety concern or not. So that's how we plan to also integrate. We plan to also have the role of the civil aviation officials into our platform. Another functionality, which is kind of the last module, is generation of the project reports. So there are going to be multiple tasks, multiple projects created in the future. For each project, there are going to be multiple tasks created. So what we also plan to build is this ability of the system to generate multiple reports as per the need of the users. So next slide. So these are basically the 8 different modules of the drone tasking manager that we are building. Now let me try to summarize what is the impact that we are trying to create. What is our ultimate kind of the goal by the creation of the tasking manager. So as my colleague Ivan shared earlier, the main thing that we are trying to do is provide more opportunities to the local pilots. So as I mentioned earlier, by developing functionalities like the notification system, the drone operator login, what we are trying to do is the local pilots in these different developing countries, now they don't need to worry about finding drone jobs and getting connections, trying to make connections to find jobs. But in this open source platform, if they are eligible, they will automatically get notified that there is a drone job that they can apply to. So that's our first main goal. Of course, the second is the data accessibility, which the problem that Ivan mentioned around commercial satellites and high resolution imageries. The third one is enhanced crisis response. Let me give you an example from Nepal very quickly. So recently we had an earthquake in Nepal, in far western part of Nepal. But then, the topography that we are going to work was the settlements were very distributed. So in that area, a big flying drone would not be able to solve the problem. The best solution would have been multiple drone pilots from that local community, mapping these multiple communities that are scattered around the hills. So what we're trying to do, trying to achieve is enhanced crisis response in locations like this, where a swarm of community drones might be the best solution rather than a large drone-based mapping mission. And ultimately, we also want to achieve the cost reduction in terms of access to imageries. So those are the four main impact that we're trying to achieve. Over to Petia and colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Uttam. Right. So you heard from Ivan the why this is happening, and hopefully Uttam gave you more information on the detail, especially for those of you who are drone pilots or project creators. That was helpful. So next slide, I'll hand over to Ivan for another, Ivan, I would say 5-7 minutes to tell you about the projects, right? He'll share as well his screen to bring this a bit more to life. And over to you, Ivan. Yeah, I'm sure you use different examples. You can also see on our website a post about that work in St. Lucia and Dominica. Over to you, Ivan.
You betcha. Okay, I do want to, okay, I can't screen share yet, Petya. You have to stop screen sharing. Okay. And, oh, come on. There we go. I think that's working. Okay. Now, before I talk about the individual projects, I have
able to. Can people see a screen? Just double checking quickly, Ivan. I'm not yet able to see your screen.
Okay.
We don't see anything.
Okay, not yet, not yet. We're gonna give it another try. It worked. We tested, and
now?
there we go. Now we can see. Now we can see.
Yeah.
Now we can see a spread. Yeah.
I have a spreadsheet here, which I'm happy to share with anyone. Ben, here's basically, the core of what I'm looking at. Can you see the writing on this spreadsheet?
Yes, I think it's good.
Yes.
It's readable. Okay. All right. So assuming for the moment that you actually had a drone that was capable of doing 2 square kilometers a day of 5 centimeter orthometric imagery, or 1 square kilometer a day of 3D imagery, which is to say, and I'll show you in a moment what that actually means, when you're flying multiple angles so you can see the sides of buildings and so forth. Let's say your drone cost $1,100. And let's say you expected it to be completely replaced every 45 working days, every 2 working months. You literally buy a new one. Think of the drone as a consumable. In other words, your drone actually costs you $24 a day because you buy it for $1,100 and you expect to have to spend another $1,100 45 days later. Imagine that you're paying yourself $35 a day, which wouldn't be great for someone from Switzerland, but I'll tell you what, if you live in Burkina Faso, that's pretty good. In fact, there are countries where we work where that's riches. Imagine that you're actually expecting to pay $2,000 for your license and only use it for 100 days. In other words, you're literally paying over $20 a day just for your license, just to have a drone license. Imagine that there's somebody, for every 5 people flying, there's somebody paid $50 a day for supervision. Imagine that you're spending $20 a day on transportation to get back and forth to where you're working. That would mean that you're spending $111 per day operating your drone. And if you're doing 2 square kilometers a day, that means the cost of acquiring a square kilometer is $56. So if you had a 100 square kilometer city, it would cost $5,500 to acquire the entire city with high resolution drone imagery. Now imagine further, that I won't go into the details here, that you're going to use OpenDroneMap, and our partner OpenDroneMap is deeply involved in this project and more. And OpenDroneMap, which is free software, tools available to everyone, is really the inspiration behind what we're doing here, as well as an organization that's working with us on this. Now, actually, what you're looking at for 2 square kilometers a day, it costs $68 per square kilometer. And for super high resolution three-dimensional imagery, it costs $136 per square kilometer. At the moment, when the World Bank purchases drone imagery, they're typically going between $300 and $900 per square kilometer. Communities using this kind of technology can do it for $100 to $200 per square kilometer and still make an excellent living at it. Okay, so that spreadsheet is pretty key to what we're building here. This is a whole new industry. When you can take, I mean, there are drone contractors right now regularly charging people $900 per square kilometer. If you go to Globy, for example, a very well-established drone imagery provider, they will ask about $800 per square kilometer. Okay, let's see what we can do with these tools. Okay, moving right along now. What do I mean by 3D imagery? Now, this is actually the imagery that we acquired when we were testing exactly the assumptions in that spreadsheet. So look at this. This is Dar es Salaam. This is an area where my very good friends at OpenMap Development Tanzania used to have their office. And this is what can be done with an inexpensive drone, only flying single grids. Imagine digitizing using imagery like this. How many of you have been trying to digitize imagery and not sure whether that's one building or 2 buildings? To be able to look around the side makes an incredible difference. The quality of imagery that you can see here. Imagine further that you're in Sierra Leone, in an informal neighborhood, a slum, and you're looking to figure out which building is which in here because you want to do enumeration surveys, household enumeration surveys. How many of you have worked on an area like this in the tasking manager, trying to figure out which building is which? Well, imagine having imagery like this. This was taken by a local member of the Sierra Leone OpenStreetMap community, Mr. Tommy Charles. This was taken with a Mavic 2 Zoom, a very inexpensive and actually quite out of date and not even the right model drone. The Zoom model has lower resolution than the Mavic 2 Pro. Nevertheless, look how I can see, even in a very tightly packed informal neighborhood, I can see the distinction from one building to the next. Imagine a community map that's built from imagery like this. Okay, so a couple of years ago, we presented some of this stuff to our friends at the World Bank in Brazil at the Understanding Risk Conference. And they actually told us, we are encountering all kinds of problems like this when we try to contract drone imagery. Contractors come into our context and they think they're going to be flying for 2 weeks. They wind up sitting there for 4 months. They're staying in expensive hotels. This doesn't work. We need a better way, and we'd love for it to involve the communities. So we showed them the concept note that we'd written, and lo and behold, I'm going to drop my screen share here, Petya, if you can bring back up the slides. After a very long period of defining and working and proposaling, we managed to obtain the support of the World Bank, and along with my colleagues at Naxa. And Naxa, by the way, is not a contractor in this. Naxa is essentially our joint venture partner. These are people who are building this because they see the need for it as well. And so they've contributed considerably more than they've been paid for. And we're building this together as the digital public good. So if I can actually, sort of enumerate the people that are really actually doing this, the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap and the wider OpenStreetMap community, Naxa, our friends at OpenDroneMap, and the World Bank providing some incredibly needed funding. And the way we've got this funding, actually, I mean, clearly the World Bank has said this is a digital public good. It's free and open source software, which is available to everyone. And because of that, well, they're able to, direct that funding in such a way that we were able to access it. But we had to do a competitive bid, but it was fairly easy for us to get it because we are the people who have always been at the forefront of providing open tools for geospatial for communities. And the funding itself is attached to some projects in the Caribbean. Now, how many of you know what happened in the Caribbean over the last 3 days? Has anyone heard of the horrifying level of climate change driven storm damage that's happened in the Caribbean? Well, so that was prescient because the World Bank, even before this, yes. So somebody's saying I'm living it. Yes. Well, I hope you and your family are all right, Kevin. And we've known, especially in light of climate change, that the risks of floods, typhoons, storms, landslides are only increasing. And small island nations are especially vulnerable to these, as are coastal areas and hilly cities in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast and East Asia. So this work in St. Lucia and Dominica is where we're going to actually be piloting the drone tasking manager. And what's the idea? Well, the idea is, once again, we use the small, sort of consumer grade drones, but how do we create high quality data with those? The trick, again, if you remember those images that I showed a moment ago, where I'm sort of pivoting around and seeing the sides of buildings. Patrick, can I screen share again, please? Right. Something that you may not be aware of in the OpenDroneMap ecosystem is when I use WebOBDM, this is Web OpenDroneMap, by the way.
We're still not
I can
seeing
actually
screen,
visualize
Ivan, if you're sharing anything. And I'll give maybe another 2-3 minutes, so we have at least 10 minutes for questions. We'd love to hear from everyone.
How about now?
2 minutes. Yes, now we can see.
Okay, so remember that imagery I showed you in Sierra Leone? Look at these. Those little blue things? Those are the camera positions. And look, they're not all looking straight down. Many of them are at an angle. What does that do? That is how we capture this super high quality imagery, which, by the way, is actually better in quality than what you would get from a $20,000 fixed wing drone. Remember how I said I was going to talk more about quality? Well, look at these. This imagery not only equals the quality you get with, quote, professional, unquote, mapping drones, it exceeds it because of the way you can actually see the sides of features. So there we are. We're actually developing a tool whereby with this inexpensive equipment, you can meet or even exceed the quality of what you can do with a $20,000 mapping drone. And the cost of it allows communities to do this, make a good living, and provide a better result at a better price to data users. So I think this is revolutionary, and I hope you will all join me in supporting this, in making use of this, in evangelizing this. And if there are any donors in the room, you know where to find me, because we could definitely use some more resources to roll this out globally and not just in the Caribbean. This is a digital public good for the entire world. This is going to change things for a lot of people. This is going to mitigate risk, and this is going to provide tools and opportunities for a lot of people. Folks, let's do this. Over.
Thank you. I'm going to just share one slide. I will ask Geoffrey to share just to know how to keep in touch, and we can keep this slide as we move into discussion. So just tell you 30 seconds, as also Ivan just said, like, what next? I think I would just say, let's do this. Let's collaborate. There are different ways to get involved. We'll share slides afterwards, but A lot of people asked also about like timeline of the development work at the moment. That's happening until end of January, until January next year. All open source, talked about digital public goods on GitHub as well. You can join Slack, read our blogs, added the emails in there. And there was, I hope I spelled that right, Ivan, about the specific drones that if anyone is using those, also get in touch. So working groups and other ways to get involved. So we can keep this slide for a bit so you can have that you can have that and know how to get involved. Yeah.
Actually, thank you for reminding me that. I do want to emphasize this. Yeah. Anybody who has a DJI Mini 4 Pro, I want to hear from you. You may actually know that your drone doesn't support third-party mapping software, i.e. Litchi, Drone Deploy, Drone Link, Pix4D Capture. None of these applications work with the DJI Mini 4 Pro. We, however, have figured out a way to do it. And because of the quality of that particular drone, we don't want to use DJIs. And in a future webinar, we'll talk about the drone that we're actually building. We're building an actual open hardware community mapping drone. But until then, the Air 2S does work with Litchi, somebody just said. Some of the DJI Airs do work with some flight control softwares, Drone Link and Litchi. But the Mini 4 Pro, which has a wonderful camera on it, it's not actually compatible with any commercial flight control system right yet, but it works for us. Now, thing is, because this is a little drone, under 250 grams, light regulatory touch, and very safe to operate, and got a really nice camera on it, we're actually emphasizing this as the first platform to support, and we need testers. If you have a Mini 4 Pro, or you even want to buy a Mini 4 Pro and you want to help us, get in touch. We'll send you flight plans, or we'll work with you to create flight plans for the areas that you can fly. And that would be extremely useful for us to have people working alongside us as we do the testing. It's not always easy to test, particularly our colleagues at Naxa and Kathmandu have to drive quite a number of hours outside of the valley to be able to fly. So thanks for reminding me of that, Petya. Very important. Mini 4 Pro, got one?
No worries. You can see in the chat some questions. I didn't know that, about DJI Air 2. So we have another 12 minutes, and I would love to, I'll read through some questions from the chat, and I'll bring that back maybe to you, Ivan or Uttam. But first, is there anyone who would want to, we can unmute and you can ask a question. So you can raise your hand and we can hand over to you to ask a question or send some feedback. It will be great to hear from some people. If not, you can also type in the chat, and I'm just going to read through some questions that came up. Thank you for some colleagues from Naxa who's responded to some of the questions. But yeah, I'll give you a few seconds if anyone wants to raise a hand. Brilliant, brilliant. And then we go. So I can see Joel first. And I know, Joel, you've added some questions, so you can maybe ask those and anything additional. So first Joel, and then Dan. Over to you, Joel.
Thank you very much. My name is Joel Ryan. I actually have two questions. How would you maintain the uniformity of the imagery captured? That's the first question. And the second one is that, are there any plans to create an efficient data storage and retrieval system once all this data has been captured? Thank you.
So much. Let's maybe go one by one. I think it's two. Let's respond to those first. I know Adarsh
you want me to answer that one?
Yes, go over to you, Ivan, first.
Okay, great questions. Okay, for uniformity, every drone has a different camera angle of view and resolution. So I have actually done this before. I have 3 drones. I have a DJI. I absolutely hate DJIs, by the way. I only have one so that we can reverse engineer it. But I've also got an Autel, which I love, and I've got a Parrot Anafi, which if you have one of those, they're a wonderful, old, inexpensive drone that does a great job of mapping. All of them have different camera characteristics. Okay, well, what are the actual critical characteristics for uniformity imagery? Exposure, of course. So, you want to have reasonably consistent color. And that has to do, basically, how do you control that? Well, you basically have to look at your flight speed, your exposure time, and so forth. Resolution, or what we call ground sampling distance. Well, for me to actually fly the same mission with my Parrot Anafi and my DJI, my Autel Evo 2 Pro, I fly the Parrot at 80 meters and I fly the Autel at 120. That gives me actually the same resolution. To get the same overlap, I just make sure that my usual way is about 70 forward, 80 side overlap. Or vice versa if I'm just doing ortho imagery. In other words, as long as you know the specific characteristics of the camera and the drone, you can create flight plans that give you the same GSD, the same overlap, the same camera angles. And OpenDroneMap, the amazing photogrammetry, free and open source photogrammetry suite, it can actually turn that into a beautifully consistent data set. So it can be done. As for storage, the short answer is buckets of AWS credits. And the long answer is there's a whole conversation that has to be had about not just the ortho imagery, but also the original point clouds, also the original images, all of the things that come out of these drone missions, which can be reused in multiple different ways. And we've had some conversations with, for example, the Cloud Native Geospatial Foundation about figuring out how we can, really make not just the imagery, but all of the elements of the data, a global public good. But it's a lot of data, and it's not cheap to store. So it's going to take some thought and some creativity. Over.
Great, thank you, Ivan. Thanks, Joe, for the questions and for typing them. Over to you, Dan.
Sorry, it's muted. Hey, Ivan, super exciting. Thanks for sharing everything. You mentioned editing OpenStreetMap using the 3D imagery. I was wondering if you had any ideas about like the futures for that type of workflow, because right now I don't think it'd be particularly easy that you'd have to have like the two windows next to each other and manually kind of keep them pointing at the same thing.
Well, if you've got any developers that are interested in a version of ID Editor or JAWSM that allows you to peek around the corner, I am really interested in that. What we have been doing is a very primitive process where we use indeed two windows in QGIS, one 3D and one 2D. And you basically use, there's a facility in QGIS to sort of keep those two windows roughly synced. And you basically use the 2D window to digitize and use the 3D window to sort of like, peek around. You use it just to sort of, well, okay, I can't tell if this is one building or two, so I'm going to use the 3D window to tilt over. It's not great. We definitely need something that's, in the browser for that. I mean, incidentally, as a sort of side note, one thing that I strongly agree with the Cloud Native Geospatial Foundation is that if tools are going to be globally inclusive, they need to be in the browser, and ideally in the browser on mobile. So that's something we just going to need to work on. But there's a chicken and egg problem. Why would anybody work on that when there's not much data available for it? So we have to, for now, create the data and do the best we can with it, and hopefully, with availability of that data, the incentive to build the tool is going to come. But it's a gap. There's no doubt about it.
And as another one, has there been much thought about how this might be run? Do you envision multiple instances, similar to like for the tasking manager, how there's OSM US, Teach OSM, and Open Sidewalks all have their own instances, or that HOT will be kind of the only main host? Kind of more how with Kobo Toolbox, I don't think anybody outside of Kobo has really managed to successfully self-host that for very long. And what will be HOT's cost recovery model for the hosting expenses?
Well, okay, so that's a bunch of complicated questions. First one is easy. We certainly hope that we're not going to be the only people hosting one of these. So, I mean, we do intend to host one, but we intend to host one where, we as a sort of open mapping community judge that there's a need. And that probably won't, for example, be covering San Francisco. It'll be covering Freetown and Monrovia and Cote d'Ivoire and Kathmandu. There will be cases where, in terms of cost recovery, there will be cases where there's actually commercial work to create drone imagery. In that case, we might be using that to, cross-subsidize where we hope to be, providing this even the hosting the imagery for free. Certainly, if somebody wants to use it commercially, I mean, the tool is open. If somebody wants to use it to create proprietary imagery, great, go for it. I mean, this is free software. If you wanted to do it, if you want to use it to cover San Francisco, commercially, go for it. Spin up your own instance. In fact, I really kind of hope that there will be lots of people using this for, whatever they want to do. Sam, our DevOps here, he should probably be the one answering this. Everything we do is actually built in such a way that we're expecting and hoping that others will deploy it for their own purposes, and maybe those purposes will be something we never even thought of. In terms of the revenue model, I mean, or the sustainability model, I guess would be another way to put it. Well, we know right now that there are a number of people paying for drone imagery. And so at the highest level, Dan, I guess the opportunity is this. There are people willing to pay hundreds of dollars per square kilometer for good imagery. There are communities who would love to provide this and earn a living doing so, but neither of them can interface with each other. The World Bank or a big insurance company in Zurich, neither of them have the sort of administrative machinery to hire 20 people in Ouagadougou. That's impossible. And at the same time, 20 people in Ouagadougou have absolutely no way of coordinating their efforts to produce high quality imagery that would actually satisfy a World Bank or insurance company consultant. So ours is not a middleman role, I don't think. I don't think the opportunity here is to skim off somebody's labor. I think the opportunity here is to enable those two parties, somebody who needs and can pay for imagery and somebody who's in that community and can create it, enable them to actually work with one another. And I believe that there is money in that. And I don't necessarily mean there's a profit to be made. I mean, there's resources available. There's a need for this imagery such that somebody will be willing to pay for it and will be delighted they can pay it to community members rather than to foreign consultants. And if we can enable that, I believe that people will come to us and we'll find a way to make it, financially sustainable. Over.
Thanks, Ivan. Thanks, Dan, I know we have a few questions in the chat, some more answers. I make sure we capture them and also follow up. There's 2 minutes left, but if people are happy to stay a bit longer, I'll hand over first to Victor and then to Maiko to ask their questions. And then, we'll come back to Ivan, and Utam, feel free to also jump in. And otherwise, we can stay a bit longer for those of you who can and listen to the questions. If you need to drop out, thank you so much. We'll share recording, we'll share slides and any answers, and you have the emails to get in touch and ways to get involved. So first over to Victor and then Maiko to hear your questions, and then we'll stay online to answer.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this is an exciting webinar. And I've been trying to catch up with the focus of the webinar on drone and drone taxi manager. I think the last speaker, really was saying something that is trying to make sense to the local communities, maybe trying to reach out to get in touch with those that can provide drone and then so on. But I want to ask, this drone taxi manager, are you saying now that we have a platform where we can have different layers of interfacing layers of drone image and other satellite imagery? Is that what you are saying? And if not, can we really have a clear understanding of what you're saying about drone taxi manager? And then what's the difference between this drone taxi manager and open area map? Thank you.
Okay, I'll move on to Maiko. I'll hold this on if we can, Ivan, and then we'll answer all those questions. I think we captured that, the difference in the logic. Over to you, Maiko, so we can answer them in one round.
Thank you. I just really wanted to give you a shout out. I think there's not a single point I disagree with that was mentioned today, which is pretty rare. So total respect to the community-driven approach. And so the really important point is that I think you're closing a fundamental gap with the Drone Task Manager. So we at the African Drone and Data Academy, which is our UNICEF program where we train young Africans for free on how to pilot drones and acquire data and use it hopefully for good. So we really like this concept of DPG and open source and all of that. And I think what you develop here will definitely looks like something we want to integrate. So I would be happy to continue that conversation, and shout out to the team. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michael. Really appreciate. All right, back to you, Ivan, around Victor's questions and also the difference with Open Drone Map.
Well, so Open Drone Map is the processing platform. So Open Drone Map is a critical piece of software. Without Open Drone Map, we wouldn't be even able to contemplate doing this. And I might add, Open Drone Map is also a partner in this. The founder of Open Drone Map, Steve Mather, is a great personal friend of mine. He was just staying at my house in Japan a couple of weeks ago. We went to Understanding Risk together here. Open Drone Map and that whole community is an integral part of this. But specifically what they do is they provide software for photogrammetry, taking drone images and stitching them together into usable products. Three-dimensional products like meshes and digital elevation models, two-dimensional products like orthophotos. And so that, that is part of our back end. The drone tasking manager is really, it's a coordination layer over that. Open Aerial Map, another project, which is intimately linked up with all of this, which is actually maintained by HOT at the moment. Open Aerial Map is essentially a storage bin. So, between those multiple layers of things, we have, the drone tasking manager, which allows people to coordinate their efforts to take photographs. Open Drone Map, which allows basically our back end, take those photographs, which are, the photographs taken in the drone tasking manager are intended to be part of a larger data set. In other words, when you fly with the drone tasking manager, you're not flying just to process your own area. You're flying for your photographs to be part of a much larger data set with lots of people's photographs, all calculated to be compatible to create consistent imagery and processed on the back end. And that's using the Open Drone Map technology. And finally, the storage and dissemination of all of that is Open Aerial Map. So it's an ecosystem that all works together. For the user, it should be relatively transparent. What my hope is that you'll have the drone tasking manager when you want to go participate and fly, whether because you want to contribute to the map or possibly because there's paid work to be done with it. And when you want to use it, you go to Open Aerial Map and you find it. And if you're an expert and you want to do your own stuff with Open Drone Map, well, then go do that. Over.
Thank you. Maybe we can I was thinking, Ivan, I think Victor, maybe others have this question of maybe a diagram when people hear about Open Aerial Map, Open Drone Map, now the Drone Tasking Manager. So there are things in there. I'm aware of time. I think there were a few questions in there, a bit about I think, Ivan, you shared the cost model. So there were a few questions of people interested about, utilizing low cost, was the best drone and all of that. So I'll capture those, maybe share with that. I'm just looking if there's anything else that we've missed. There was a question from Tim about if there's been a discussion about bringing in survey ground control. I'm not sure if there's anything we can answer now.
Well, if you'll let me screen share, I have a discussion about that. So for anybody who wants to stick around and see something interesting, here it is. Can you drop screen share for a moment, Petya, and I will show something.
Of course, yeah. And again, appreciate everyone's time. Whoever is available to stay. The formal webinar has closed in a way.
You don't have to stay here.
Those of you who can, feel free to stay for another, 15 minutes or so, and we can answer questions.
All right. Who can see my screen? Anyone?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. All right. So this is one of my crown jewel data sets because this is Monrovia, Liberia. And this is an area that we flew on a World Bank project in 2019. Then I was there in February of this year, and somebody locally happened to have an old Mavic, and we flew it again. So here I have for your delight and delectation, Monrovia, an informal area of Monrovia in 2019 and 2024. Okay, so notice this building in the middle here, right? When I flip this around, you can see there's enormous change around it, but that sort of white square or rectangular building in the middle, it doesn't change, right? You can see at the lower left edge of the screen, there's a building that had a brown roof and it got a green roof. You can see, here there's a structure that actually was created since then. Well, this is really interesting because this allows us to calculate things like change sets. So, for example, here we used AI to build a change set. So those purple areas are where there's, a change. A building was demolished or was created. So why am I telling you this? Because your question was about georeferencing, how we're going to get survey points in there. My answer is, that's a bad idea. You don't want perfectly georeferenced imagery. What you want is imagery which is georeferenced to the previous imagery, right? Most people don't want or need imagery which is perfectly referenced to the Earth. They want imagery from which they can look at change. The Earth, by the way, is a lot like a really wobbly soap bubble, and you're trying to actually pin down where you are on it. I mean, for example, I was just in Nairobi, which is moving at least 5 centimeters a year because it's in the Rift Valley. Actual perfect geolocation on the Earth, when you start talking about, the level of precision that you get with a survey, is really, really tight. So my very strong belief, after seeing the utility of having this sort of, multi-year drone imagery, is that what you want is to just pick a reference layer. You don't care necessarily whether it's perfectly accurate to the Earth and a plate-fixed coordinate reference system. You want it referenced to a base layer of imagery. And what I would like to see is a good base layer of imagery, which is reasonably georeferenced, and every year, twice a year. My dream is that every city in the world gets flown twice a year, rainy season and dry season, by local people using inexpensive local drones. So we have change sets over time. We can appreciate how climate change and urbanization and development and growth actually happen for people. Now, what about those of you who actually need perfect georeferencing? Sure. Use a $250 ZED F9P GNSS sensor and create a transform. So I believe that you should have two products. One is the reference layer of imagery, which is georeferenced to a reasonable degree and is in the 3857 coordinate reference system. And then you should have a transform that you can actually do with, good high precision dual or triple frequency GNSS equipment to actually provide a reference to, a plate fixed high precision survey grade coordinate system. So that's what you want. You want imagery which fits the previous imagery and a geodetic transform to allow you to tie that down to, sort of high precision survey grade infrastructure. And for that, very easy. You can do ground control points using inexpensive dual or triple frequency GNSS equipment. In the drone that we're building, we're thinking of adding an RTK chip in there. So we'll see if that works. Wait and time budget, but we'll see. Sorry, long answer, but it's an important question. And the answer is reference the imagery to the previous imagery. That's what really helps most people for most things. And then do your surveying aside. Over.
Right, great. I got some of that note. So there's a bit of discussion of DJIs. There is one more specific question on DJI Air 2. Can that be used or no? Is that a simple?
We're not right now. We are only developing on the DJI Mini 4 Pro. Okay. However, it is our strong expectation that we'll be able to support most consumer DJI drones because we're working with Waypoint Markup Language, which is a DJI spec. So we expect to be able to support all DJI drones, and we're certainly building profiles for all DJI drones so that, for example, if you've got a Mini 2, you'll still be able to fly and create imagery which is compatible with the other drones because we'll modify your flight plans to the right, elevation and overlap so that you're creating compatible imagery that fits. We hope to support pretty much every consumer drone that people have. I personally detest the company DJI, and I don't want to work with their stuff because it's so proprietary and phones home and is not very open at all. but we're going to be trying to support DJIs and AUTELs and homebrew drones and so forth. But for the moment, we need to get this working with one drone, and we've chosen, for better or for worse, the Mini 4 Pro. It's $1,100 for a kit with 3 spare batteries. Yeah. It's being currently manufactured and it works. So it's, that's the first thing we'll go with. And the others, we'll see what we can do as we go along.
All right. You can also stop sharing, I think, Ivan's screen, because we can see double faces. But I think that answers also one of the questions we had of why there's also some things around regulations that it's banned in India at the moment. Let me see what else. I think Kevin was in touch. We can also share emails to kind of connect. I'm not sure if we can answer what is the best drone that you suggest. Different views in here. And from Candice, is there a visual benchmarking of different cost and drone specification available over a use case? I'm not sure about that one. Let me see if those of you who stayed, some opportunities in here. Thank you, Uttam. I think Uttam's responded to some of the questions. Great. I think maybe we'll wrap up here unless there's anything else coming as an urgent question from anyone. I want to give huge thanks to Ivan, to Udam for the great collaboration and partnership, for sharing more. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate that. So thank you for staying longer with your questions. I would say keep the questions coming. If you're on Slack, reach out to us. I've also shared our kind of working group channel. If you have that drone that Ivan mentioned, reach to him directly via email. And thank you for staying longer. I think this is just the start. So we'll keep you all posted, maybe do another webinar in the coming months, again, to update you, but huge thanks again to everyone. Thank you for staying longer. Have a good rest of your days. Thank you so much.